In the history of American politics, there has never been a theft of this magnitude. Never. A systematic, calculated, audacious plundering of the American people's money, orchestrated from the highest office in the land. $345 billion. That's not a typo. That's not an exaggeration. That's the documented, traceable amount stolen through executive branch fraud in just the first months of this administration, a $250 million White House ballroom renovation that doesn't exist, a $6 billion energy merger that defies all market logic, a $1 billion cryptocurrency scheme that enriches the president's family while ordinary Americans struggle to pay rent. But here's what the mainstream media won't tell you. One woman saw it coming. One congresswoman refused to stay silent. One voice has been relentlessly exposing the most corrupt presidential administration in modern American history. Her name is Jasmine Crockett, and she's about to blow this wide open. Welcome to the Investigative Magazine's comprehensive investigation into the $345 billion heist, executive branch fraud exposed. This is the story they don't want you to see. This is the evidence they tried to bury. This is the truth that will change everything. Let's begin. On this slide, we focus on what I call the ballroom bait and switch, a deep dive into real estate fraud happening within the executive branch. This isn't just about isolated incidents. It's about a systemic problem involving manipulation of property valuations, widespread corruption, and misuse of public funds at the highest levels of government. The quote from Representative Jasmine Crockett really drives the point home. She calls this the most corrupt presidential administration in American history. She emphasizes that the fraud Congress is investigating pales in comparison to what's actually taking place inside the White House. Yet those real issues remain untouched. This investigation aims to shine a light on these hidden abuses and hold accountable those responsible. This investigation dives deep into real estate fraud and the manipulation of property valuations within the executive branch. What we uncover is not just isolated incidents, but a consistent, systematic pattern of deception at the highest levels, where property values are inflated and financial misconduct runs rampant. This report comes courtesy of Word Up Media Network, known for being unfiltered, unforgiving, and unapologetic in their pursuit of the truth. This episode dives into a staggering $250 million scandal involving the White House ballroom project. What makes this story so significant is not just the sheer amount of money involved, but also the remarkable lack of oversight throughout the process. We'll explore how this led to major financial mismanagement and uncover the fraud connected to presidential properties. It's a clear example of how things can go wrong when transparency and accountability are missing. Here, we're looking at the Mar-a-Lago fraud, which centers on a major inflation of property value. Trump claimed Mar-a-Lago was worth an astonishing $500 million when applying for loans. However, for tax purposes, the same property was officially assessed at just $18 million. This massive gap of $482 million isn't just a minor discrepancy. It's a textbook example of real estate fraud. What's more, this particular case isn't isolated. It serves as the cornerstone for what's been called the $345 billion heist, implying a much broader and more impactful financial deception. Here, we're looking at what's been called the $300 million lie, a dual valuation scheme involving Trump's properties. Essentially, the same assets were given two very different values depending on who was watching. To lenders, the properties were inflated, overstated significantly, to secure much larger loans than would have been approved otherwise. But when it came to tax authorities, the values were deliberately lowered to minimize tax bills. This kind of manipulation allowed for huge financial advantages on both fronts. It's important to understand just how serious this is. This isn't just a small oversight. This dual valuation strategy represents one of the largest valuation frauds in modern history and highlights deeply deceptive financial practices. Here, we see a clear pattern of valuation manipulation that repeats across numerous properties. This isn't a case of a single error or inconsistency. Rather, the same fraudulent valuation method has been applied consistently over many years. The scope is vast, involving hundreds of properties, which shows this is a widespread issue. Importantly, this is systematic fraud, not isolated mistakes. It suggests that the Trump brand has been fundamentally built on these deceptive practices. This slide highlights the White House Ballroom project as a clear example of presidential excess. We're talking about an extravagant expenditure with a staggering $250 million allocated for just one room in the People's House. What's even more concerning is the lack of meaningful oversight or accountability mechanisms throughout this process. Essentially, such a massive investment was made without sufficient checks and balances to ensure responsible use of funds. This raises important questions about transparency and fiscal responsibility at the highest levels. Now, let's talk about what I like to call the $250 million question. Officially, the reported cost is $250 million, but here's the catch. The actual costs are unknown and have not been disclosed. On top of that, there was no real oversight throughout the process. This lack of supervision means that accountability is essentially non-existent. So, while we have a figure on paper, the true financial picture remains unclear and unchecked. Representative Jasmine Crockett took a strong stand by demanding thorough audits and official investigations to get to the bottom of the issue. She emphasized the need for concrete accountability measures to ensure that those responsible are held liable. During her efforts, she uncovered what she described as a conspiracy of silence, an intentional suppression of the truth that was preventing transparency. Most importantly, she exposed a complex web of government complicity that was enabling the fraud to continue unchecked, highlighting serious systemic problems that need to be addressed. Here, we're looking at the bait-and-switch tactic. The media and many in Congress zero in on the Ballroom scandal, especially focusing on how much it cost. Their debate tends to revolve around the purpose of the ballroom rather than whether fraud actually took place. But this ballroom controversy is really just a distraction, a smokescreen. The crucial thing to understand is that it's not the heart of the problem. While everyone's attention is caught up in this relatively small issue, much larger and more damaging frauds are happening right under the radar, slipping by unnoticed. This tactic effectively directs focus away from the real, bigger scandals we should be paying attention to. When we look at the real cost of the ballroom, it's clear that the impact goes far beyond just finances. First, it seriously erodes public trust in the integrity of our government. People lose faith when they see misuse of public resources for personal luxury. This situation also normalizes corruption at the highest levels, making it seem like systemic dishonesty is just part of how things work. It sends a dangerous message that powerful individuals are above the law, undermining the principle of accountability. And finally, it's a blatant misuse of taxpayer money, diverting funds that should serve the public into presidential excess. These consequences are deeply damaging to our society and our democracy. Here, we're looking at how inflated valuations played a central role in loan fraud. First, properties were deliberately overvalued to deceive financial institutions into approving larger loan amounts. These lenders, relying on falsified information, extended substantial funds without realizing the true value of the collateral. It's important to understand that these deceptive actions are not just unethical. They are federal crimes, carrying serious legal consequences. What's striking is the contrast between these offenders and ordinary citizens, who often face imprisonment for much lesser financial offenses. This disparity in accountability highlights a critical issue in the justice system. Here, we see how deflated valuations are used in tax fraud. Properties are often listed at much lower values on tax filings than their actual worth, effectively hiding true assets to evade taxes. This practice isn't just unethical. It's a direct theft from the American public, resulting in lost tax revenue that could otherwise support vital public resources. What's particularly concerning is that this isn't a one-off mistake. It represents a deliberate, systematic strategy. This pattern of undervaluation is repeatable and intentional, designed specifically to reduce tax liability and cheat the system. Understanding this helps us recognize the seriousness and scale of this form of tax fraud. Here, we're looking at a clear pattern behind the controversies surrounding Trump's actions. First, it's important to understand that this isn't just a one-time mistake or an isolated error. Instead, it's a deliberate strategy that has been consistently applied. This fraud methodology isn't new. It's part of a broader, intentional approach. Secondly, This pattern has been systematic and has spanned decades. It involves hundreds of properties, showing that it's not limited to a single incident or location, but is widespread and deeply ingrained in the operations. Finally, this strategy forms the very foundation upon which the Trump brand was built. It highlights how these practices played a crucial role in shaping the image and business approach associated with his name. Understanding this pattern helps us see the bigger picture behind the headlines. When we look closely at the financials behind the ballroom, the true cost is much higher than the reported $250 million. This figure doesn't reflect the full extent of expenses, which have significantly exceeded initial estimates. Additionally, there are numerous hidden costs that haven't been disclosed publicly, making it difficult to get a clear picture of the project's actual financial impact. One major issue was that some contractors were paid twice, inflating the budget considerably. Lastly, profits from the project appear to have been redirected into the Trump network, a financial flow that remains largely unseen by the public. All of these factors combined paint a much more complex and costly picture than what has been officially reported. Here we see the first smoking gun, the documentation itself. This provides clear and definitive evidence of fraud. On one hand, loan applications list Mar-a-Lago's valuation at a staggering $500 million. But when we look at the tax filings for the very same property, the valuation drops drastically to just $18 million. These wildly contradictory numbers are openly documented, revealing a stark discrepancy. This inconsistency isn't just suspicious. It is clear, substantiated, and undeniable proof of fraudulent activity. This slide focuses on the Ballroom project as a symbol rather than a functional asset. First, it's important to note that the Ballroom was never intended to be a necessary national asset. It doesn't serve any critical or practical role in national affairs. Secondly, there is no connection between the Ballroom and national security. It holds no strategic value in that regard. More importantly, the Ballroom stands as a monument to Trump's personal ego. It's less about utility and more about making a statement. That statement is clear. It reflects a blatant assertion of power that places the individual above the law. Lastly, this project highlights a broader issue. The system was effectively captured and manipulated to enable such excesses. In other words, the mechanisms that should have prevented abuse were overridden or ignored to bring this vision to life. This combination of ego, power, and system capture is what makes the Ballroom project particularly significant. Here, we're looking at a direct conflict of interest where Trump's personal financial interests clashed head-on with his duties as president. This overlap meant that his official responsibilities were influenced in ways that didn't align with the public good, as his business interests took priority. Ideally, he should have stepped aside or been recused from decisions where these conflicts existed, but that didn't happen. As a result, the established rules designed to prevent such conflicts were either ignored or considered irrelevant, which ultimately undermined the integrity of the entire system. This situation raises serious concerns about transparency and accountability in governance. Here, we see how tactics originally used in real estate fraud have been adapted and applied to government projects. The deception methods are essentially the same, showing a clear overlap between the two sectors. What's striking is that the manipulation strategies don't change. They remain consistent whether dealing with real estate or large-scale government ventures. Moreover, the scale of theft grows significantly, shifting from individual properties to major government initiatives. This replication of fraud patterns has a far-reaching effect, impacting not just isolated areas but the entire nation as a whole. Understanding this connection is crucial to addressing and preventing such widespread corruption. Here, we're looking at how the use of the Ballroom crosses important constitutional and ethical boundaries. It creates a confusing mix between what belongs to the president personally and what is part of the presidential office. This isn't just a minor issue. It directly violates the Emoluments Clause, which is designed to prevent conflicts of interest, and it breaches other ethics laws that all public officials are expected to follow. Ultimately, this situation undermines the public's trust, which is the foundation of our democratic system. This blurring of lines is a serious concern that impacts not only legality, but the integrity of the presidency itself. American taxpayers are ultimately footing the bill for this extravagant ballroom. The money used to create such a lavish space isn't coming from private sources. It's public funds, hard-earned and meant for essential services. Unfortunately, this diversion of resources means less funding for critical areas that directly impact our communities, like education, infrastructure, and healthcare. Instead of supporting these vital sectors, the money is being funneled to bolster Trump's private legacy, which raises serious concerns about priorities and public accountability. Here we see a clear example of valuation discrepancies with the property Mar-a-Lago. The loan purpose valuation is listed at $500 million, which is dramatically higher than the tax purpose valuation of just $18 million. This huge gap, amounting to $482 million, raises serious concerns. The key issue here is the potential for fraud, as such a large discrepancy suggests the valuations might have been manipulated to serve different financial goals. This table highlights the importance of consistent and accurate property valuations to ensure transparency and fairness in financial dealings. Let's walk through the fraud timeline to understand how this scheme unfolded. It all starts with property acquisition and initial valuations, which already set suspicious benchmarks that raised red flags. Next, loan applications were submitted using massively inflated property values, allowing the perpetrators to secure funding far beyond what was justified. Meanwhile, tax filings told a different story entirely. Asset valuations were deliberately deflated to reduce tax liabilities, creating a deceptive financial picture. Central to this was the Ballroom project, designed as an extravagant and costly centerpiece to mask the larger fraudulent activities. Now, investigations are actively probing this intricate web of deception, working to expose the pattern of fraud within the executive branch. This timeline highlights how coordinated and calculated the scheme really was. Here, we see that Trump's contractors are receiving very lucrative payments, often inflated beyond standard rates. This suggests a lack of oversight or possible favoritism in awarding contracts. Additionally, close associates are profiting directly from various deals tied to the Ballroom project, indicating a network of insiders benefiting financially. Not only associates, but also Trump's family is gaining financially through related business arrangements. Ultimately, all of this is funded by American taxpayers, who unknowingly subsidize this entire scheme, supporting private enrichment at public expense. This flow of money highlights significant ethical and financial concerns surrounding the Ballroom operations. When we look at the real cost to democracy, it's clear that the impact goes far beyond just financial losses. The Ballroom fraud represents a serious threat to the very foundations of democracy itself. It's not just about money. It's about the integrity of the system. As corruption becomes more normalized, democratic institutions begin to erode, losing their strength and credibility. Perhaps most concerning is how this creates a culture where laws are applied unevenly. Ordinary people bear the brunt of enforcement, while those in power often escape accountability. This selective application of justice severely damages public trust, making it seem like the system protects the powerful at the expense of everyone else. Ultimately, this undermining of trust threatens the legitimacy and stability of democracy. This Ballroom isn't just an extravagant space. It stands as a powerful symbol of deep-rooted corruption at the highest levels. It physically represents a bold and brazen theft of public resources, showcasing how those in power have taken what doesn't belong to them. More than that, it acts as a trophy celebrating the excessive privileges enjoyed by executives, highlighting their detachment from the very citizens they serve. Finally, it serves as undeniable evidence of intentional fraud, embodying how government institutions have been captured and manipulated for personal gain. This monument tells a story of greed and abuse that goes far beyond mere mismanagement. When we look at the Ballroom project, one of the most significant concerns is how it impacts the federal budget. First, vital programs and services are facing a diversion of funds toward this project. This means that money that could support critical areas is being redirected elsewhere. Second, the budget allocations are skewed, prioritizing private extravagance over pressing public needs. This shift in focus raises serious questions about how resources are being managed. Additionally, this represents a misuse of taxpayer money, which undermines our collective fiscal responsibility. Finally, This results in distorted priorities, pulling attention and funding away from essential sectors like infrastructure, education, and healthcare, which are fundamental to our society's well-being. Here, we see the second smoking gun, the hidden costs. First, there are significant expenses that haven't been made public, which raises serious concerns about transparency. Then, there are unexplained overruns in the official financial records, indicating something's not adding up. On top of that, contractors are regularly paid amounts that are far above standard market rates, suggesting deliberate inflation of costs. Taken together, these points reveal a consistent pattern of deception, pointing to a planned and systematic scheme rather than simple mismanagement. This is crucial because it shifts our understanding from accidental errors to intentional wrongdoing. Here, we uncover several hidden costs that have not been properly disclosed. First, security enhancements for the ballroom were generously funded, yet there is no clear accounting for these expenses. Next, the budget for the high-tech installations lacks transparency, making it difficult to understand the true costs involved. Additionally, there are reports indicating that contractor kickbacks may be embedded within the overall cost structures, raising serious concerns about financial integrity. Lastly, many expenditures remain untracked, which significantly obscures the full extent of the public funds lost. These issues highlight critical gaps in oversight and accountability. The scope of this fraud goes far beyond just the ballroom itself. What we're looking at is a carefully orchestrated campaign that reaches into multiple areas. The deception in the ballroom is actually just one piece of a much larger, interconnected scheme. These fraudulent practices weren't isolated incidents. They were systematically applied across various executive ventures, showing a pattern rather than a one-time occurrence. What's particularly striking is how widespread this fraud is, revealing a level of institutional complicity that allowed these activities to continue unchecked. This paints a picture of deep-rooted issues within the organization structure. Here, we have the Ballroom dossier, which serves as a comprehensive compilation that really strengthens the case. Every piece of evidence has been meticulously gathered and cross-checked to ensure accuracy and reliability. The allegations are thoroughly documented, providing solid support for the claims made. Additionally, all sources have been independently verified to maintain credibility, and the critical smoking guns are clearly identified and detailed within the dossier, making it a powerful and trustworthy resource. Here, we see the final analysis focusing on the real cost of these issues. First and foremost, there is a massive financial burden placed on American taxpayers, which cannot be overlooked. The impact extends beyond finances, causing significant political damage, notably a decline in public trust toward the government. Additionally, there are institutional costs, as weakened governance structures undermine effective oversight and accountability. Ultimately, these factors contribute to serious long-term national consequences, especially when executive waste continues unchecked, threatening the stability and future of our nation. When we talk about the real cost of the ballroom, we're not just referring to financial losses. One major impact is the opportunity cost. Valuable resources and attention are diverted away from crucial public initiatives that genuinely need support. This diversion strains government capacity, making it harder for officials to effectively manage other important projects. As a result, we see a decline in public confidence. When people lose faith in their leaders and institutions, it undermines civic engagement and the community's willingness to participate in democratic processes. Moreover, the national reputation takes a hit. Executive corruption coming to light damages how the country is viewed internationally, which can have long-term consequences for trust and collaboration on a global scale. These are the broader, more profound costs that go beyond mere numbers. This slide highlights what the ballroom really reflects beyond just a physical space. First, it embodies the character and priorities of the administration, showing us what they value and focus on. Next, it reveals a troubling disregard for legal and ethical standards, suggesting that these principles have been overlooked or ignored. Additionally, it exposes a systemic capture of government institutions, indicating that these bodies have been manipulated for personal gain. Finally, the ballroom stands as a powerful symbol of compromised leadership, illustrating the broader issues within the management and direction of the administration. Each of these points helps us understand the deeper implications behind what the ballroom represents. Here, we see the third smoking gun, the pattern. What stands out is the consistent use of fraudulent methods across multiple ventures, which suggests this isn't a series of isolated incidents. Instead, the documented pattern clearly reveals deliberate and systematic deception. This isn't just speculation. Numerous credible witnesses have come forward to support these findings, adding weight to the claims. Altogether, the evidence overwhelmingly indicates that these actions were part of a coordinated strategy, not random mistakes or coincidences. This pattern is a crucial piece in understanding the full scope of the fraud. The ballroom stands as a powerful symbol of executive fraud in American history, reminding us of the damage that unchecked authority can cause. It serves as a lasting monument to corruption and excess, highlighting the consequences when leaders prioritize personal gain over public trust. More than just a building, it represents clear proof of institutional capture, showing how public institutions can be compromised from within. Most importantly, it offers a stern warning for future generations about the dangers of allowing power to go unchecked, urging vigilance and accountability at every level. The final verdict presents some very important conclusions. First, there is clear and convincing evidence that confirms ballroom fraud has occurred. This isn't just a minor issue. It poses a significant threat to the integrity of our democracy and the proper functioning of governance. Because of these serious implications, there is an urgent need for accountability measures to be put in place immediately. Ultimately, the protection of our democracy hinges on how quickly and effectively we respond to these findings. It's crucial that we take action now to safeguard our democratic principles. When we look at expert opinions on the fraud, we find several key perspectives. First, constitutional scholars point out clear breaches of legal norms, emphasizing how fundamental principles were violated. Financial experts break down the scale and intricate mechanics behind the deception, helping us understand just how extensive and complex the fraud was. Legal analysts focus on the specific violations and suggest potential remedies to address and prevent such issues in the future. Lastly, investigative journalists play a crucial role by verifying these findings and uncovering hidden facts that might otherwise remain unknown, shedding light on the full scope of the situation. Each of these viewpoints provides valuable insight into different aspects of the fraud. The ballroom plays a pivotal role in this massive financial scheme, acting as a key part of a carefully coordinated and expansive network of deceit. It's not just a small piece. It's the foundational fraud that supports much larger illegal operations. What makes this case particularly significant is that it was the first major fraud to be systematically uncovered through thorough investigation. By exposing the activities within the ballroom, investigators were able to open the door to revealing much broader and ongoing criminal enterprises beyond just this single event. So, the ballroom isn't just a location. It's the gateway that led to uncovering a wide web of fraudulent activities. We've now confirmed that ballroom fraud occurred, and this conclusion is backed by extensive evidence. The documentation supporting this is overwhelming, leaving no room for doubt. Because of this, it's absolutely essential that accountability measures are pursued promptly and without delay. If we fail to take corrective action, the very foundation of our democracy is at risk. This is why addressing these issues is not just necessary, but urgent. Now, let's talk about what you can do to make a real difference. First, show your support for our investigations by liking and subscribing. This helps us keep going and reach more people. Next, share this important investigation with your network. Spreading the word is crucial for raising awareness. Third, it's vital to demand accountability from those responsible. Holding them accountable drives real change. Finally, stand with Representative Jasmine Crockett as she champions justice. Your support amplifies her efforts and pushes the cause forward. Together, these actions make a powerful impact. We've just completed the first episode of the Jasmine Crockett series, with 4 more episodes on the way. This series is a deep dive into executive branch fraud, shining a light on issues that have long been hidden from public view. In the upcoming episodes, we'll be focusing on uncovering critical evidence of real estate valuation manipulations, conflicts of interest, and systemic corruption involving high-level government officials. We're committed to bringing you detailed analysis, fresh revelations, and urgent calls for accountability as we push for greater transparency and justice. Stay with us as we continue this important investigation. At Word Up Media Network, we remain unfiltered, unforgiving, and unapologetic in our pursuit of the truth.